If humanity wants to do more than just be a single species rock, first we're going to need to stop being stupid and threatening to nuke each other all the time, because that is seriously such a fantastically dumb idea. Who wants to be the ruler of a bunch of irradiated ash? Secondly, we need to have another country legitimately step up and be a contender in the space race. Ironically, humanity has held hands singing Kumbaya for too long when it comes to space, and it's making us not really care about space. We gotta really hijack the primitive part of our brain to be like, we need to go further. Somebody go poke Russia with a stick and tell them to focus on space again. Disclaimer, you're also getting post-migraine Roanoke, which is typically, anyways, yeah, you kind of see. But, the concept of the space race actually was pretty awesome. Regardless of if we do it sooner or do it later, the reality is that we just need to do it. In the 2030s, there's an asteroid allegedly heading towards our planet. And actually, let me fact check that. Just kidding. So, the day after it was scheduled to impact us, it'll pass actually 4.4 million kilometers from Earth. Either that or the plan is to not panic anybody. So they pretty much changed its designation. Anyway, stranger things have happened. So, that does not negate, though, the idea that there are still asteroids out there that if it does hit us, we are totally boned and we may not even see them coming. Because of this and Earth's limited resources, we need to strike out into the stars and start becoming a multi-planet species. But therein lies the problem. As far as we know, nobody is out there. Well, maybe that's actually not a problem. So in the spirit of Alien Romulus coming out, which apparently I have heard some things, I decided to torture myself by observing one of the planet's most intelligent biologists by watching Prometheus. And I have to tell you, why God? As humanity has made traveling amongst the stars in the 2090s a fairly common thing, members part of a science team would head out to an unknown planet at the behest of the ancient cave paintings of man. With no ability to see the stars or the constellation in general, it seems the societies at this point in time had to be told about it because they could not directly observe it. However, getting there, there's clearly an issue with what was being created. So in today's episode, let's discuss Prometheus and any science that we can find. I mean, the genetics of the melting alien is pretty sweet, but anyhow, let's get to it. But before starting, as always, thank you guys for even watching this channel. Absolute cool of you. Feel free to like, as you're told by literally everyone, it helps, and it actually does. I also have a gaming channel called Roanoke Games. You should probably check that out. Bit of a side project I have going on. And you should join my Discord today. Do it! We do movie nights as a squad that will actually end up on this channel, and it's pretty fun. Plus, you can make suggestions there on stuff for me to cover. I'll actually see it there. So, links for both of those in the description. All right, let's get to it. So we kick off our story with the understanding I absolutely hate this biologist in this movie. This guy was, without a doubt, an actual, I bet you, marine biologist. And I will die on that hill. This is the only type of scientist that would clearly look at a dangerous animal that is posturing for an attack and be like, oh wow, you're beautiful, let me touch you. Absolutely frustrating. Put me in that movie and, well, I'm probably gonna get my face too close to one of the vases checking it out. But at least I didn't get taken out by a snake. Plus, it was clearly hissing. Miss me with that nonsense. I will throw shade later on. As we descend into the clouds of an alien world, this is actually taking place over Humansville, Missouri. Go check it out today for yourself. We see the wide open plains just begging to have some buildings put on them. Human expansion cannot be stopped, nor should it. In the immortalized words of Dead Space, the stars are ours. As a ship moves overhead, it's absolutely massive. Approaching the waterfall, one guy gets left behind, putting his grinder on the ground, soldier status over here strips, and then checks out the icky gooey. Knocking the mysterious substance back like a freshman at a frat party, he behaves like one too, barely handling the material. Brings me back to college. As his veins turn black and he starts stumbling around in pain, brings me back to college. They start collapsing as his genome begins breaking down and melting as well. Brings me back. Falling apart, he enters the water and becomes one with the alien planet. Okay then. On the other side, his genome reforms into cells, presumably in the ocean, that now go on to form complex life. So, a long time later, we see Carrie Byron from Mythbusters digging in the ground. A man yells out to her as she calls back. They are on the Isle of Skye, entering a hole in the ground. Carrie then hands him a flashlight as they have found some paintings. They are around 35,000 years old and they depict people just sort of vibing out, pointing at a constellation in the sky. The scientists are super jazzed over this find, which arguably the government would cover up in about 2.8 seconds. Meanwhile, out in space, something flies through as we are on a scientific exploratory vessel known as the Prometheus. We meet one guy who is tasked with waking everyone up from their sleep, wearing a marathon helmet as he creeps on Elizabeth Shaw. Carrie is dreaming about her and her father Ed Warren talking about the afterlife. It appears to be a dream as she sees Marathon Man creeping in the distance but doesn't really register that he's there. Yep, checks out. As the Believe campaign from Halo Halo plays, which I believe is Raindrop Prelude 15, I want to say. Anyways, this diorama was honest to God the peak of video game trailers. Marathon Man plays around for a while with impeccable posture as he learns languages from back home. Basically, it's all about just killing time at this point. Drinking a glass of milk like a complete psycho, he dyes his hair, at least I'm assuming, as he watches a movie and then combs his hair. Heavy hitting action in these first few minutes, huh? Walking along, the ship then shifts as they come out of warp speed as they have reached the threshold of their destination. A planet with a single moon. Oops, we went the wrong way. We went back to Earth. Approaching the planet, never mind, it's not Earth. It has rings. Heading back to the crew area, Blondie is already up doing, I guess, what Hollywood would call push-ups. Not great push-ups, in fact. Her arms are not going 90 degrees. That is doing nothing for her. The key is if you can't do a full push-up with your body weight, instead of using your toes, you go to your knees, which will allow you to get to the 90 degrees typically. Anything past that, if you want to stay on your toes and bend your arms at that angle, that's just all ego-based. She then asks for a report as nobody has expired and everything is all good, which she doesn't really care. Marathon Man then wakes up everyone else as Carrie starts puking. Symbiote asks if she's okay, and she keeps throwing up, so she can't really answer. Only now in this late hour do I learn that this is actually not Tom Hardy. Can you believe that? It's just a Tom Hardy lookalike. Regardless, he's still symbiote. It still stands. One man is in setting up a Christmas tree as Blondie comes in there and asks, "What is that?" Gal, you know what a Christmas tree is. Quit playing. So the biologist then tries to introduce himself to Big Red over there, but the geologist turned failed cartographer later, you'll see what I mean, isn't really interesting. So that went over about as well as a wet fart on a first date. Heading to the gym, the owner of this fine vessel tells them her job is to make sure they do their job. Peter Whalen then gives them a pep talk about how he's their employer. He says he's probably already dead at this point. Well, with that attitude, I'm not surprised. He calls out David saying, "This is the closest thing I've ever had to a son," right in front of his daughter. What an alpha Chad move. Mr. Whalen Yutani himself then calls out the doctors to approach, saying that they're in charge as he just kind of nopes out of there. Symbiote holds up a Rubik's Cube because a normal thumb drive would not suffice. It's gotta be unique. Anyhow, it contains info of all their digs over the years. All show a collection of stars in the distance, sharing no contact with one another on a societal level. Every society pointed to these stars. Essentially, the system has a sun. That sun has a planet. That planet has a moon. That moon has an atmosphere. The moon may sustain life. Big Red makes fun of them, upset that he had to come out here as evidently that's a problem. Like, my man, you accepted the gig. You're getting paid for this. Cry a little more about it. So they all have a nice laugh at the biologist, or I guess archaeologist. They're not biologists. So the archaeologists make a bold claim about how maybe humanity descends from these aliens. So the biologist then asks if they have anything to back that up concerning this species allegedly planting life here on the planet, that being Earth, and then leading to humanity rising. Well, future biologists, did we ever solve the issue of the formation of organic compounds turned into cells? A bit of a leap. We still don't know how it's possible. I mean, it is the 2090s. Maybe they were able to figure that out, but you know, something we should probably figure out. There's definitely hypotheses concerning this, but nothing as of yet is concrete. So Marathon Man then takes the doctors to the captain's quarters. Essentially, it's just a life support pod. It also has a machine that can do surgery, which will be hilarious later. I want you to remember the financier or whatever of this ship is Blondie, and her family from Whalen Yutani Corporation owns this whole thing. It's so dumb. Anyways, Blondie starts talking smack about them for, you know, coming out here and about the beings that they are looking for. She then says that they cannot engage nor talk with the beings if they actually are down there. So Blondie shuts down the plans pretty much out of the gate for any type of contact, which is why you're out there. Gee, what fun. So Pacific Rim then says that they are headed into the atmosphere as he checks the composition of this atmosphere. 71% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 3% carbon dioxide. Without a suit, you will suffocate in a few minutes. Flying through, you think they would have scanned the planet from higher up to see if there was any life, but they really don't. They just scan when they get down there. So they find no radio or heat sources allegedly. But what's funny about radio is if you have an interstellar species like this, radio would basically be comparable to smoke signals now. It's just so slow. And I mean, you have the fact that radio waves spread out and then transmissions get screwed up. Probably any species that's interstellar is not going to be using radio, except for like short range. And even then they might not. So David says there is no man in the desert, but that does not mean nothing is there. As he kind of gets looked at, they're like, what? And he's like, oh, never mind. So as they scan, Symbiote gets up telling them there is something in the valley that built on straight lines. The lore doesn't build in straight lines, he says, except for the geological rock formations that appear to like straight lines known as disjointed shale, but whatever, it's all good. So taking her down, they conduct a perfect landing as they're ready to engage with the locals. Looking out, they see a very unnatural structure in the distance. As Symbiote then kisses Carrie, he says he wants to suit up. Probably could have phrased that better. Pacific Rim says, why don't they just wait? He's like, yeah, well, why don't we just check it out tomorrow? There's only 6 hours of daylight left. Like, are you serious, man? Y'all flew all this way to see this and you want to wait? So Jackson is evidently the security here as Symbiote asks why David even wears a suit if he's not human. But you need to understand, he asks it in like a completely douchey way. Everybody is antagonizing the Mandroid. So the Mandroid says he does it because humans are more comfortable with their own kind, so he's forced to do it. All right, then tough crowd. But yes, let's antagonize the Mandroid some more. It's pretty good. Thank God we didn't give them emotions or ulterior motives. And I have no idea why, but that was so hard to say. Anyways, heading to the ship that Master Chief most certainly didn't bounce around in upon entry into Halo's atmosphere when he was told to sit down, which definitely didn't take out all the Marines on board with him. They then head out to the structure. Symbiote is pretty jazzed about going to the structure, and everyone is pretending this is business as usual. It's so bizarre. Like, sure guys, everyone would be totally chill about the alien structure you're approaching. The driver says the structure is hollow, though he doesn't know if it's natural or artificial. Getting out, Carrie says, this seems artificial, not natural. This means someone built it. Thank you, Carrie. Walking towards it, yeah, it's totally built. And as they walk in, the rest watch from the ship, which are the best seats in the house, to be honest with you, as I don't know if I would want to go in there without some sort of countermeasure. The cartographer then looks at the biologist as they feel a little bit uneasy about this whole thing. One guy rightly deduces it's a corridor, good work, as the cartographer sets up his map balls to go and then scan the place. Then he howls because on all levels except physical, he's a wolf for some reason. As the balls then map the structure, it's beamed back to Prometheus. Tunnels run for vast amounts of distance in every direction. Following Cartographer of the Year's directions, he does not sound sure of himself in the slightest on which direction he's going. We got an Alfred Packer situation going on here. 0 out of 10 would not follow. As they find liquid water, the CO2 levels on the ship are totally fine. The air is completely breathable. Allegedly. Symbiote, very excited about this, takes off his helmet first because apparently the atmosphere is breathable and there's nothing in there that would totally wreck your body. Yeah, real smart. Just because the air is breathable doesn't mean there's not some insane melt your lungs out of your chest microorganism floating around in some quantity that may not have been detected yet. Man, we are stupid in the future as a species. So as they continue to explore the most dangerous way imaginable without any barrier to the air that they're breathing, David starts finding a sticky liquid on the... Okay, I have to stop here. First off, so doing EMT courses and doing the EMT training and all this stuff that I did a while back, one of the big things they told us about were gases that may not be detected that you can literally be dropped. For instance, I believe there's like a truck of liquid ammonia, or maybe it was liquid nitrogen, I can't remember. Anyways, the truck had a leak, so a bunch of firefighters approached it because there was some fire, they had to put it out, and all of them dropped. It was definitely ammonia, if I remember correctly, because the gas, even in the open environment, was just in that specific area more concentrated, and nobody knew it was happening before it was all over. So the point is, just because it's breathable in one area does not mean it's breathable in another area. And then don't even get me started on like stale air being an issue. All of this, Prometheus is just a love note to making every bad decision possible. And I know I'm not a film reviewer, but it's just so frustrating because it's like, you guys are supposed to be scientists and doctors. There is no way you are this stupid. You would absolutely be, because you know the consequences of taking your helmet off. You're breathing in something that could be extremely bad for you. You are on an alien ship. This is a biosafety lab level 4 in terms of you're going to keep your stuff on. Anyways, sorry for that little bit of a rant, but it is what it is. I hate how they did this movie. So David starts finding a sticky liquid on the wall. I mean, he gets lonely on a ship after thousands of years, I guess. And then touching stuff, it lights up as a beam of light flies through the area. They call out to David as some holograms then come running back as David has what appears to be an experience with it. And everyone decides now is a very good time to leave as they follow the holograms. One of the holograms gets its head crushed by the door. Left by your boys. They find the body laying there decapitated. As they watch on the ship, the captain then laughs as the money captain it's just completely shocked that they found some. The cartographer, being an actual geologist, starts freaking out at Carrie for some reason, like, bro, calm down. It's just a dead alien. Those are a dime a dozen if you break into Area 51. Checking out the body, Map Boy here has left the server as David climbs a random ladder. Carrie takes a sample of the body, determining that this thing has been gone for at least 2,000 years. David then opens the door as gas comes out. Yeah, go ahead and breathe that in. I'm sure it's just the same as the air that's out here. Good plan. And again, y'all haven't even tested that Area area yet. That could be anything. For all you know, it could have just been straight up what they were trying to contain. So looking in, they find a giant face as well as an alien's head. The carved face is very much so looking human, which is a bit strange. And as they walk, they find worms are under feet. Paintings are on the ceiling and vases or vases are all around. David gets his face dumb close, even for a mandroid, as Carrie approaches a metallic thing. David begins poking this black goo as he says, it's organic. Looking up, the murals begin changing as the disturbance of the atmosphere has ruined them. Or they're alive, I haven't really determined that. Back on the ship, they then clock a storm coming in as they put the head of the alien in the bag. Pacific Rim then fakes a country accent, telling everyone it's time to come back to the ship, as we only have 15 minutes. Symbiote then, was that a Western accent? I don't know. Symbiote says it's just another tomb, which bums him out, as David then takes some of the black goo with him. I mean, it is more than just a tomb. It's undeniable proof that aliens do exist. Symbiote then calls out to David in his best Captain Price voice saying, "We are leaving," as they now get on their four-wheelers. And this is literally the epitome of humanity. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is humanity's approach to vehicles, I'm just telling you. And that's why the mongoose in Halo is just a four-wheeler. A four-wheeler that can handle a 1,000-pound Spartan, but whatever. So a dust storm then starts rolling in, which is odd considering this planet, or moon at least, seems pretty lush. Where's the dust storm coming from? So getting back to the ship, they then drop the head by accident as Carrie gets blasted back, which made me laugh, as Symbiote goes to get her. The side door then opens as David gets thrown around like a baby in a dryer as he hooks them up and they all head back to the side door. Decontaminating the garage, Symbiote yells about how dangerous it was as evidently the guy with the map got lost. Hilarious. The biologist is also stuck in there with them as they will be picked up after the storm is over. In the medical wing, they begin scanning the head of the alien as they realize it's wearing a helmet. Pulling the helmet off, it's a giant Woody Harrelson head. Seeing the black pulsating stuff underneath the forehead, they say, well, he must be changing. Carrie then gets an amazing idea. She says if we put a spike into its brain, we can trick the nervous system into thinking it's still alive. Okay, let's stop there with that comment. So essentially what they were basing this on is forcing an electrical shock through non-functioning nerves into muscle, all of which has been desiccated for 2,000 years. While the head looks to be in remarkably good condition, why would there not be any issue concerning decomposition? Why would the black goo stop affecting the head just because he dropped? Why did it take so long for the goo to be reactivated? It seems to me the goo will only work on creatures containing an active electrical firing in their nerves. Tied to the depolarization event in the brain, the goo will behave in different ways when subjected to an electrical shock. This may be, for all intents and purposes, what we will see later due to the creation of this substance and how it's actually supposed to work. So the head begins moving, as the head is now totally freaking out by itself as they have functionally activated its almonds. As they put it into a biosafety cabinet, they try to freeze it looks like, as then the head explodes regardless. Well, that could have been a horrific contamination event. Again, also, why are some of them wearing PPE, but some of them are just in street clothes, specifically Symbiote? This would be a BSL-4 lab at minimum. I'm talking positive pressure suits, full body, decontamination room. I hate how they're doing, like, the level of just, blasé, like the exposure they would be exposed to, and they're just casually subjecting themselves to this, makes me think that none of them are really doctors. They're really just cavemen who accidentally commandeered a spaceship. At least at minimum, certainly nobody's a medical doctor around here, and that includes Mr. Biologist, who's probably again a marine biologist working with the anglerfish. That's right, you thought I forgot about anglerfish and the beef I have. Nah, brah. This is why this dude probably looks at the snake creatures like, wow, you're beautiful. Truly, anglerfish study your behavior. So Marathon Man then gives a report once more to someone as he finishes up that convo and then heads out. Blondie is standing there asking him really close to his face what her father said, at least I'm assuming it's her father, as then she grabs the mandroid, that's probably a good idea, as then he tells her father basically said try harder. Classic old man, am I right? David, having snuck in one of the vials, takes a look at it. Some sort of black goo, I mean it's doing something, it looks strange. Carrie then runs a test to see what this creature's DNA is as it matches humanity's. David meanwhile takes some of the black goo and observes it, continuing to kind of formulate a plan, as then he comes over to Symbiote and asks if he wants a drink. Everyone there is just a mega douche to this David guy. I can't imagine why he hates humanity, as Symbiote says they hope to get answers, but everyone is dead. Mandroid then asks what he would be willing to do to get answers, as Symbiote says, well, I'd do anything. Just right prior to this also, Mandroid says, well, what were you hoping to find? And then Symbiote's like, oh, I was hoping to find our creators, but we didn't. You know, we just want to ask them why they created us. And Mandroid's like, oh, okay, well, why did you create us? And Symbiote's like, oh, because we could. The Mandroid just says, oh, well, imagine if your creators said that about you, how would that make you feel? And he's like, oh, well, good thing we didn't give you emotions. Am I right? I hate symbiote. So, welcome to the, you're about to get your answers, brother, as he becomes the experiment to see what the black goo even does to the human body, which we will get into an explanation of the black goo here momentarily. You would think there would be a lot of science in this movie, but there really actually isn't. But God help me, it's never stopped me before from crackhead speculation. Back on the alien ship, rather than sit still, they decide to walk around and explore the alien house of horrors as they find a pile of alien bodies, which is a pretty good indicator you probably need to stop exploring. They find the bodies are opened up from the inside as if they exploded. Pacific Rim calls to the guys asking their positions as he says, oh, there was a ping that came in. The probe is picking up something not dead. The biologist says, what do you mean, not dead? Like a life form? It's life, bio boy, life! So they keep asking him if it's moving, and then the captain just kind of doesn't give a crap about him. He's just like, it disappeared. I'm sure it's nothing. Gee, thanks, Captain. So they decide to move the opposite way of the ping, which is a pretty smart idea. Carrie then talks about how the head combusted as the guy ran. I think it combusted in your lab, sister. What are you talking about? Anyways, Symbiote comes in flirting as he's trying to get some action, and he talks about why the aliens abandoned them. Like, bro, you sound like a man with daddy issues, I'm not gonna lie. She then hands him the gene profile saying, well, we come from the aliens, so if that's the case, I guess there's no afterlife confirmed, which is a win, but a crappy win, unless we need to figure out where the aliens came from. Of course, that means we were created by life, so would humans have a soul, or would we basically just be organic mandroids? Symbiote then says that there's nothing special about the creation of life, which is a pretty bold statement, as Carrie says she can't create life because she's sterile, which then that totally kills the mood. Like, I'm not laughing at her sterility, but it's like, those were completely unrelated. But she gets upset by this statement, and Symbiote, he's like, this is not directed at you. This has got to be one of the most, I've got nipples, Greg, can you milk me? Levels of getting angry at Symbiote I have ever seen. So the guy who drank the fireball at the beginning, while it may have looked like it destroyed his genetics, it was actually important that it happened. My God, it's all connected. We're not so different, you and I. So with this knowledge, let's discuss what the black goo actually does and where it ceases functioning, as this will help to highlight what is actually happening to Symbiote later. So first, it should be known that the black goo is not only something that destroys, but it also creates. This chemical is affectionately known as chemical A0-3959X.91-15. This is created by the engineers in an effort to eradicate all life, but only animal life, as it should have left botanical life. This means basically animals are back on the menu, boys. So it appears to function in a way by breaking the sugar phosphate backbone of the DNA double helix structure. And this clearly would be absolutely detrimental to the survival of an animal, and in this way, it is most definitely viewed as a weapon to destroy. Why the engineers would want this is a bit odd though, but it seems like at least initially to jumpstart a planet and the foundation of life, an engineer can drink this liquid. Appearing like an oil, this may be by design. This oily substance may be for the purpose of entering cells, which have cellular membranes to create a barrier with the extracellular matrix. This delineates what is cell and what is not cell. By being an oil, it can actually pass through the cell membrane by attaching, because as you know, cell membranes are non-polar because there's a phospholipid bilayer which is non-polarized. So by being an oil though, it can actually attach to this because it is also non-polarized. So from here, it is known the substance contains microorganisms that will reshape the structure of the DNA or destroy it. And those non-compatible, they will be reduced to a genetic soup, as with the engineer from earlier. This process is likely accomplished through the presence of certain chemicals within the microorganisms, such as magnesium, aluminum, calcium, and lanthanum salts, all react with phosphate to form an insoluble compound. By utilizing these chemicals, the microorganisms would be able to interact with the backbone of the DNA, dissolving it. If the intention is to do this on purpose for the sake of seeding a planet with the critical starting point of organic molecules becoming cells, which appears to be what the purpose is here, then this is where it would all begin, and this is what it was used to create. However, if its purpose is to wipe out life in an effort to bring it down to plant levels, this chemical does the same thing. By being dropped into an area, it will atomize in the atmosphere and be breathed in by the surrounding population there. Here is where if you're not completely compatible, you would just kind of melt. If you are compatible, your DNA is rewritten. But why is the DNA rewritten? Well, it appears to me that the intentional purpose of this material is in fact, once again, to melt you down and seed life on the planet. But much like how we have nuclear energy or nuclear bombs from the same knowledge, so too does the black goo have a dual purpose that presents a problem that the engineers may not have accounted for. After melting down engineers who decided to take one for the team and spread life, it would likely have been discovered pretty quickly that this chemical they created has those who are dubbed compatible, if you can call it that. The microorganisms would not break down the DNA of the animal, but instead would spend time rewriting the code in their genes. And this appears to affect all all cells, but first and foremost affects the cells of the reproductive system. The reason being, as the DNA was altered in the somatic cells, the sex cells were changed at the same time. However, the physical presentation of the changes took time, as seen with Symbiote in his somatic cells. So his sex cells were already corrupted by this point as well. But we can see how exactly it is rewriting. When it comes to the sex cells, sperm and eggs are haploid, meaning they only contain half the DNA needed to form a person. This is by design, as it helps genetic diversity continue on. When Symbiote and Carrie got frisky, she obviously was impregnated with one of those embryos despite being confirmed sterile. There were no eggs to fertilize, so as a result, the cell that was diploid had to come from Symbiote. If we go back to the engineer seeding the water with his own genetics, what we see is the genetic coding entering the water, and from here the DNA would form new cells that are clearly genetically viable, as the entire planet had life sprung up on it. So even with the DNA shredded, the new DNA had to be constructed in order to have a fully functional creature. This same process took place in Symbiote. Turns out the microorganisms were stored in the balls all along. So as it altered the sex cells, it's likely the process was as simple as turning it from haploid to a diploid cell. Given what we will see later, when the creature comes out, it's clear that some human DNA is used, but a lot of DNA combined together to create this thing, and it had to be pre-programmed into the black goo initially in order to create the squid monster. Basically, you just don't form a squid monster for funsies. This process would likely have to stem from the actual microorganisms themselves, contributing specific gene loci to bridge the gap between certain genomes. Now you may be asking, yeah, but Roanoke, that seems ridiculous. And it's because it is, but only because it appears to be outside of what the engineers initially intended. I believe they did want to melt down engineers to seed life on other planets, but I also believe they did not fully understand what their technology was going to do, and that due to this fact that life doesn't always behave in the way that you think it should, it can cause problems to arise. If you look at how the engineers actually operate, their ships are alive, their suits are alive, their helmets are alive, everything appears to be alive, and they love spreading life. So the key is they love life. Their technology is no different. Using the microorganisms, they may have behaved in the desired way at the beginning, but only once in a while would these microorganisms run into a form of coding or something that would just be slightly different about the host that then cause the microorganisms to behave differently, which results in the monsters being formed. It's kind of like, you can look at it this way. While inorganic will perform the same function over and over again, organic always changes. So again, this caused monsters to form as opposed to what the desired outcome actually was. Monsters like what Symbiote was about to become, but also monsters like the actual alien species or the giant face hugger that hugs the mewing Chad at the end. I hope I have adequately explained what the black goo is. Moving on, going from hot to cold in half a second, they then start getting hot and heavy like it's the first time. They now hold the unofficial record of banging on this planet. Blondie now approaches Pacific Rim, just barely missing the time frame of when she would have held the record, as she then asks how much longer this is going to take. And you can literally just go in cryosleep if you're that bored. Pacific Rim then makes a pass at Blondie and then asks if she's a robot, which apparently this works. Man, what an approach. So he goes over to her quarters, as then they hang out. But back at the little alien shop of horrors, they check out the vases as the geologist starts getting a little high. The biologist says he's ashamed to count him as a scientist as a joke, because the biologist is a joke himself, because I'm totally about to disavow him, as a literal snake-like creature exits out of the black goo. The biology boy here starts getting close to it and then talking to it. Like, are you kidding me right now? That is an unknown species. And as it opens up as he approaches, like, it is literally hissing. What a genius. So it predictably grabs his hand and then wraps around his arm. Brother, you deserve this 100%, as then it breaks his arm. He cuts the head off, which is just pure acid, as then it breaks through the biologist's suit, entering his mouth. The geologist's face then gets burned off because they're both idiots, and I mean, what in the world was that interaction? So here we see an example of what the black goo actually does to a compatible host. This is essentially a worm that was in the dirt earlier, as seen when they walk past the vases, and these creatures, after being exposed, become something known as an anathema or anathema. Not really sure how to pronounce that word, but these are creatures whose original genetic structure has been corrupted, as they call it. I believe this supports my point as well concerning the microorganisms building specifically a desired monster. If you look at the face huggers, the worms, the big tentacle thing at the end, you will see they all have at least somewhat of a similar structure structure of those who are originally corrupted versus those who are impregnated later. But the question is, why? Also, why do they always go for the mouth? Well, it's the aforementioned desirable body plan by the black goo organisms building specific structures. Which brings up the question, did the engineers create the black goo, or did they simply find it and figure out its properties? If it's the latter over the former, then this could explain why it's in the same vein of similar creatures running around all throughout the franchise. The anathema hail from a homegrown, original desired genetic body plan on another planet that the engineers just co-opted. This would be absolutely wild if they did this, but it would help to explain why they seemingly didn't realize that monsters could be created. So what is the genetic influence? Well, similarly to how plants and animals on Earth all have the double helix genetic structure, it may be by natural compulsion some compatible host genetic structures are altered into the shape of what will be read as specific genes, which are then built out. Perhaps these gene loci are almost a non-negotiable for one reason or another on the planet they hail from, so as a result, they are transplanted into the animal genome of any animal of what the engineers screw with to create the anathema. The next morning, Symbiote gets up, taking off his ring and splashing some water on his face. Several broken blood vessels in his eyes denote, something may be wrong. Basically, critical cells are undergoing apoptosis, which is never a good sign. And as he looks closer, he sees something leaking out of his eyeball. Eyeball goop. Delicious. Captain then calls in saying they lost contact with a dynamic duo last night, so they head in to go check out what happened. Heading into the little house of alien horrors, they then call out, but nobody answers. Blondie watches from the screen as she calls out to David, saying to send his link to her room. As he heads down a tunnel by himself, he approaches the morb, because it's a map orb. Or maybe it's a Morbius and it's morbing around, who knows? Oh god. Anyhow, as it morbs, it's stuck in a door, as in the door asks him what's the color of night. He guesses sanguine, my brother, as he enters the room, with the ball going absolutely crazy, continuing to map. Seeing all the vases, there's quite a bit in there. Opening the next door, the ball continues on mapping. As he walks past what appears to be a statue of the aliens, it could also just be their suits hung up, I'm not 100% sure. David covers his feed as he sees the sleeper pods. Carrie now sees a symbiote's eyes, saying he's sick. Chance starts taking a chance, getting his face super close to that vase. Like, put your helmets on. Apparently the vases were not like this last time, and Chance then finds the biologist passed out on the ground as Symbiote falls down. She says this is not good, as clearly he's infected. Gee, do you think maybe you should have kept your helmet on? I mean, I get that's not what caused this, but for all you guys know, this could have been. The snake thing then jumps out, scaring everyone as it enters the beautiful waters of Lake Minnetonka, as then they run back to the ship. As David checks the area that he's in, he pushes a button as a chair comes out. Sitting in it, the hologram then starts playing as everyone lays down for their long nap. They play a flute, which is kind of hilarious, as evidently their ship is based on music. Okay then. David then watches this, learning. You know what? You guys ever notice it's always music that we attribute to like aliens? Like the aliens in Dead Space 3, music. These aliens, music. Close Encounters, music. What was that one game where you're like, it's like during the Iraqi war or something, and you go down into the actual like cave in? It's bugging the crap out of me. Anyways, it's basically like vampire aliens down there. Music. Anyhow, so David watches this, learning their movements as a system can be seen on the hologram. Checking one solar system, David is straight up vibing as we can see Earth proving it's a sphere. Oh god, here come the flat earthers. So then all of this shuts off as David is left in his depressive state once more, with Earth disappearing last. One of the pods then lights up and then slowly fades out. I'm guessing the ship used the last of its power, and then shining a light on him, David comes over to see it's still breathing as the heart beats. Pacific Rim then calls out to Blondie, saying, make sure the back door is open. Bro, the time has passed. That was the previous. My lawyer has actually advised me not to finish that joke. Symbiote is looking quite unsymbiotic. Downright parasitic, some would claim, as they request the door be open. Blondie comes out with the flamethrower as she says he's not coming aboard, and I mean, absolutely right. Symbiote then starts having a freak out, hitting people as Carrie says she won't leave. Symbiote says it's okay, looking a little worse for wear. He then approaches Blondie, saying, literally burn me, as then he's summarily lit on fire. Now, that's one way to enforce containment. See, guys should have kept your helmet on. Carrie has a nice cry on the ground as then she passes out. So David shows up to steal jewelry under the guise of it being contaminated. David does a scan and then asks if Carrie hooked up recently with Symbiote. Completing the scan, he tells her she's pregnant. She's 3 months pregnant, actually. She says they hooked up 10 hours ago, but says that's impossible. Are you guys saying like you haven't went heels to Jesus in over 3 months? She requests to see the fetus as she wants it out of her. She tells David to get it out of her as evidently it's already causing issues. He injects her with some sleepy time juice as David now tells Carrie he watched her dreams. Okay, weirdo. So she passes out on a blindingly white table. Later on, a doctor wakes her up or tries to wake her up by smacking her in the face as she pretends to be asleep as the contamination team goes to grab her. She begins her attack as as she's stopped by the rapidly growing fetus, though. I would have to assume that's what it is. And running to the pod, she activates the emergency procedure. And get this, the pod is only calibrated to males. You took females on the voyage, so why is it only male? So she it was in Blondie's room, who's female. Anyway, so she hijacks it, setting up the emergency foreign body extraction as she stabs her legs with something and then gets into the pod. Not sanitizing anything, I have to ask, where are the doctors? Like, did she really hit them that hard? So the robot finally starts doing what robots do as it cleans her stomach and then laser cuts her, which must feel amazing being awake. Opening the womb, the crab hand claw thing comes down and then starts lifting it out. Well then, that's not ideal. So the creepy squid thing then bursts on the wound, definitely going to be getting an infection from that later as it wasn't done cooking yet. It starts freaking out in the pod as her wound then gets stapled as she's released from the pod. Hit that thing with a brick to finish the job. So closing the pod, it's decontaminated, which you would think it would need to burn it too, but I guess not. The creature is then knocked out for a moment as she's able to get out of the room. Pacific Rim now says the monitor for the world's greatest geologist is just outside the door. Going to check? Well, he's folded like a suitcase. I would not approach that thing. But apparently this doesn't seem odd to anyone. Pacific Rim then rubs his two brain cells together and he's like, wait a minute. Why would he be right outside the ship? Who put him there? He must have walked. Yeah, no kidding. My God, how is this team handpicked to go explore this planet with potentially aliens on? We sent these guys to talk to the aliens. So Geo Boy then begins his attack by smashing one guy's helmet and then crushing another guy's face. Going full monkey mode, he is just straight wrecking face. Carrie continues trying to get out of there as Geo resists all forms of counters. Some of them drive out of there and run over the geologist, while then they light him up with a flamethrower. And here's an example of alterations to the body. Obviously, many things would need to change, but functionally, what we have is similar to durability of the alien and the blood to match. Now, if you would like a breakdown of that information specifically, I do have a video over the aliens, and you should go watch it because it did absolutely mid. But anyhow, this is why I also believe there's a specific body plan in mind, and it's not just a random mutation. Geo-Man would need to have had a body structure altered in a way that would allow him to sit like that. We are talking about connective tissue becoming more elastic and stronger, given how he is able to move and jump and remain unbroken. Because they would most definitely affect the human body in a very negative way, at least in this position, this connective tissue would likely connect to stronger bones that are likely more dense, indicating that the osteoblast activity to build the bone has increased, likely at the direction of the gene alteration via the microorganism. The contractility of the muscle is higher, allowing for jumping and throwing. And along with this ability to crush skulls, it's well beyond what a normal person could accomplish. All of this shows that the body is stronger after being turned in the anathema by the black goo. And I cannot help but notice the similarity between, what was his name, Faris and Callisto Protocol, and this guy, the Geo Boy from this movie. Interesting. So Carrie now takes another hit of whatever that stuff is, as High Times over here is just having a blast. Walking into Waylon's room, she then falls as David covers her up with a jacket. Starting with the feet on Mr. Waylon Yutani. Good lord, that's gross. Waylon wanted to meet his makers. Not happening, brother. They are gone. Oh, maybe it could. David did find them actually alive, so maybe. Waylon wants immortality. So you're telling me that these guys haven't learned how to lengthen telomeres yet at this point with gene editing? Like, as we haven't done that as a species? Carrie then tries to tell him that this place isn't what she thought it was, and she says they must leave. So I guess after Carrie assaulted the staff, everyone's just kind of cool with it as she puts on Symbiote's ring that he took off as she pep talks herself for some reason. She takes some pills and then throws on a skin-tight suit as the zipping of it hurts her scar. Oh god, yeah, that actually would hurt. Pacific Rim then comes in saying this isn't the engineer's home, it's probably a military installation maybe. They were making bioweapons out here as Carrie says one of the engineers is actually still alive. Waylon now has on his walking legs as Blondie continues wearing a skin-tight onesie. Standing with her old man, she tells him he's going to die, and if he goes down there, it's the end. Also, the whole family is weird as all get out. So that was a great conversation as David then tells Carrie he doesn't think she had it in her. Waylon comes out in a suit, joining everyone else, heading over to the ship. David says Waylon can take off his helmet if he wants, as Carrie says they still don't know how Symbiote got infected, as this should have been standard precaution. She becomes sus of him because he says that is not how he got infected. I mean, it could just be a guess, gal, but I don't know. Anyways, entering the Vaz room, there are thousands of them, which concerns Carrie. On the hologram, they see what appears to be a ship. Blondie then says, Jesus Christ, it's Jason's ship. That was a really bad joke, as they are surprised the terraforming alien species had a ship. Brilliant, guys. So sitting in the captain's seat, David says they were leaving to head to Earth, and their plan was to destroy life on Earth. Why? I remember this from like long ago. Why do they want to destroy life on Earth? Well, I might have a good reason for that. So Waylon asks if David can talk to the engineers, occurs if they wake him up. So this giant nerd sits up coughing. Seems like they didn't solve the issue of hypersleep problems either, as the engineer then walks towards Waylon as the engineer literally, no joke, mews at them. Carrie then yells at the engineer as they then smack her gut, which that hurts. David then starts speaking the alien language as he looks at Waylon. Because they made the mistake of ignoring his mewing ability, or at least they broke his mewing streak, he rips David's head off before smacking down Waylon. Lady Doctor then gets chest punched as the other guy just gets thrown. Carrie then runs off in pain as Waylon straight up has a hematoma as then he flatlines out. Man, hopefully those paychecks were dispersed prior to this little adventure. Blondie then says they need to go home as the engineer readies the ship to GTFO to Earth. David, now being just ahead, watches the guy with a huge problem jump into the captain's chair as he sets course for Earth. This is the perfect opportunity for Prometheus to blow that thing out of the sky. The ship begins to take off, disrupting the ground as it then blows Carrie out of the tunnels as she uses some good old-fashioned legs to get out of there. The ground then opens up, revealing the ship. Carrie tells Blondie the ship is taking off. She says it's carrying the vases to destroy Earth. So you're telling me they didn't equip this ship with like a photon ray or like one missile? So stupid. Pacific Rim then tells Blondie she has about 40 seconds to get to her escape pod as the crew says they will stay with them. They eject Blondie's life pod as then she runs to go grab a suit. Getting their ship ready, the alien ship starts noping out of there as they give chase. The pod then hits a rock hilariously, likely breaking it pretty badly, as Blondie ejects as Prometheus then runs straight into the alien ship, disabling it. And I'll tell you what, that did not take a lot of convincing to basically get them to end themselves. Like, it was like, yeah, it's gonna go to Earth, I'm pretty sure. And they're like, oh, well, we obviously need to end ourselves. So here we have it, the crescendo. The ship starts coming down, right? And instead of running away to like the left or the right, these two absolute monoliths of intellect run in a straight line. This is without a doubt the perfect example of why everyone on this ship were the biggest idiots imaginable. This is it. This is not human. Carrie then rolls to the left like 4 feet and got away from the ship chasing them, but Blondie was crushed by it. My God, the magnum opus of this movie. So it rolls over, almost crushing Carrie, but she's saved by a rock. Waking up, she has about 2 minutes of oxygen remaining, and crawling out, yep, the ship's down for the count, it looks like. Hoofing it over to the life pod, guess Blondie won't be needing it, as climbing aboard, her suit keeps telling her she has low oxygen, as she's able to get the doors shut and the airlock sealed, as the oxygen levels in the ship increase. As she raids through it though, she hears something. Finding a curved axe. Why exactly? Because it's the future, that's why. She then goes and finds the life pod is totally screwed on the inside. As she walks through with the stupid looking axe, there's something moving around just beyond the door. Checking the window, it's the surgery pod moving around as a tentacle appears on the window. Run, Carrie! The internet suggests horrible things happen because of those. David tells Carrie she needs to get out immediately as it's coming for her. Engineer Man then shows up as she opens the door as the tentacles then grab him. Seriously, what is this guy's problem with humans? It then grabs him to no doubt take him away to a horrible fate as Carrie nopes out of there. Engineer Man is able to resist for a while, but eventually his throat is speared as I think it pretty much face hugs him. At least that's what it looks like. As Carrie cries, David informs her she forgot to hang up the call and he's been listening the whole time. That's a little awkward. She then asks how much of that he heard as David asks for her help. He says without him, she will never leave this place. He says this is not the only ship and there are many others. He can operate them, but I don't buy it. Getting on an armored golf cart, she then heads in to find David's head. His body is just kind of hanging out, but I would not reunite those two. She asks where her cross is as he tells her it's in his utility belt. Popping it on because the Lord is base, she then says she wants to go where the engineers came from. You mean the guys who wanted to destroy all life on Earth and tried to basically take you out on sight? Good plan. She says they created humans and then they wanted to destroy humans. She wants to know why. Yeah, as do I. So she puts David's head in a bag for safekeeping as she repels out of the ship. She sends out a transmission telling everyone to stay away from this area as she leaves and never comes back. They take a ship out of there and then evidently head back to the engineer's home planet. And thus concludes the brain hemorrhaging movie, except psych, an engineer alien pops out of the engineer being the first chest burster of its kind as it looks like a skinny nerd, although it's much larger than a human xenomorph, maybe stronger genes than humans. And now concludes Prometheus and the tale of how everyone in it deserved what happened to them. So finally we can answer the question, what the hell was that guy's problem? Well, it appears that the engineers actually hate humanity because of what humanity is. It seems like the engineers think they are top level because they exist in nature without competing with nature, whereas man dominates nature. But that alone is not what appears to have our differences be the issue. I think it goes further than that. It seems like everything is living that the engineers use. Their ships, weapons, suit, it's all alive. Humanity is the antithesis of this, where everything we have is dead and inorganic. If you go back 2,000 years prior, which is when this basically alien ship was deployed, probably around this time, they would have seen that we were using a lot of dead things to build like structures and houses houses and pretty much anything that we wanted to use, and fire. We were just very destructive as a species, and they probably were like, oh, if we extrapolate this out, humanity is not going to be great if they continue on. So because of that, the engineers viewed humanity as a threat right out of the gate. And it seems like their initial mission was to use the black goo a long time ago when, again, they noticed humanity was not existing well in the environment and we were just dominating it despite coming from engineered DNA. As a result, the goo testing took place and they were going to deploy it on Earth to eradicate humanity and start over. However, in testing it, they created monsters by accident, which led them to mostly be destroyed except for one guy. When he wakes up, he's like, oh man, it's been a long time. I guess nobody ever cleansed Earth. Our mistake that it was allowed to flourish. Guess we need to go take care of that, as he heads back to complete his mission even after 2,000 years. Of course, his happy ass getting anywhere near Earth by this point would have been blown out of the sky, which would have been hilarious because it's like, yeah, I mean, when we had sticks and spears, you may have been able to do something, but now it ain't going down like that, partner. So this is the only rationale I can provide for why he got up and just completely lost it. Very un-Chad-like. Maybe we will figure it out even further. We are going to be covering the second movie. That's right. We still need to talk about why engineers can catch these hands at any and all times of the day. It's like, yeah, look, we came from you and that's all great and everything, but it's sort of like, let me put it this way, right? When you were an offspring and your parents took care of you, it's like you're beholden because you're like, you can't really exist by yourself. But at this point, humanity has already advanced to the point where it's like, no, we're doing our own thing. It's too late. I say, I'm originally from Broward County, Florida, and we take these engineers out. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, leaving a like would be absolute baller of you, and subscribing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. So what do you believe the actual engineer's problem was? Obviously, this was just a hypothesis. It's not confirmed, I don't believe, by the lore. So let me know if you have a different idea. Drop that in the comments. I would love to read it. So I will also drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and Roanoke games, as well as merch links in the description. But speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, I'd like to thank our astrophysicist, Death Dancer, and Feather. Thank you guys. Next, I'd like to thank our scientists, Dakota23, Invictus Echo, Metric System, Scoot Boo, and Virix Hellstrom. Thank you guys as well. And the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate y'all's support. It's absolutely fantastic, and it goes a long way towards keeping the channel running, so thank you. But anyways, I hope everyone enjoyed this one, and I will see y'all in the next one.